Hi everyone! Welcome back to my channel and welcome back to 21st Century Literature class for my students. And for today's vlog, we'll be dealing with lesson number 4, which talks about critical reading approaches through biographical content. And for today's lesson, we will be dealing with lesson number 4, which talks about contextual reading approaches under literary reading through a biographical context. So this lesson is incorporated with one of your performance tasks, which talks about writing a critical analysis paper of a certain story or a certain movie. So let's now proceed. So these are the most essential learning competencies under this lesson. First, identifying different ways one may evaluate a literary text, specifically by examining its biographical context. And the second one, which is about discussing how different contexts enhance the text meaning and enriching the reader's understanding. So as we go on with the topic, these are the topics to be learned. First, what are the reasons to read literature through biographical context? Second, what are the biographical strategies? Third, what are the guided questions when reading literature through a biographical context? Fourth, what are the things to remember before reading a text through a biographical context? And last, what are the examples of literary works written by authors of different backgrounds? So as we go on along our way with our lesson, please be guided with the following question. How does looking through the eyes of the author help us better understand the text? So as we go on with our first topic, try to look into the word biographical. Biographical means and has a relationship with life. So what is the importance of understanding author's life before reading a certain literary work or understanding his literary work? So first one, according to Gia and Kennedy 2007, we do have understanding the author's life can help you understand his or her work thoroughly. So when you try to learn about his life experience, you will eventually understand where does she coming from. So the situations and the happenings within the story, you may incorporate it with his own life experience. Second, reading the author's biography or autobiography helps you see how much his experiences shape his or her work directly and indirectly. Sometimes, he tried to use the characters within the story as part of his life characters. But sometimes also, the symbolism takes in place into his literary work to incorporate his life experiences. So next one is about biographical strategies. So what are the strategies for us to understand the biographical context? First, you need to research on what the author believes in and also what he or she does not. Most of the time, the values of the author can be seen into his literary works. For example, if he values more of honesty, since he experienced being honest or being mistreated in certain ways or certain part of his life, like that. Another one is analyze how the author's belief system is reflected in his or her work. Next one is about look at the author's other's work and analyze if there is a pattern with regards to the theme that is indicative of his or her life and beliefs. Sometimes, the belief of the author, like for example, it's about the oppression, political issues, or sometimes more of being a woman. Sometimes it is reflected into his literary works. If you're gonna be looking into some famous writers like Jose Rizal, wherein the experience of Jose Rizal with the Spaniards, it is reflected to his works like Noli Me Tangere and El Filibusterismo and other literary works of him, because that is his life experience and it is incorporated with his literary works and also with his beliefs. So next topic is about the guided questions when reading literature through a biographical context. So what are the questions as you go on and learn and understand some stories? First, you need to understand first what year was the text written and published. For example, it is written way back in martial law era and it talks about suppression or oppression of and suppression of rights. Definitely, maybe the author has the experience of oppression. So is there any significant that experience that happened in the author's life during his time? So try to look into that question before going into the literary work so that you will understand the relationship and the connection. Another, what were the circumstances that happened to the author before the writing of the text? And next one is, were there several drafts of the text? What can you say about the changes that the author made? Maybe in some part of his time he got or he experienced oppression, o kaya he experienced about being heartbroken, o kaya he experienced about some political issues. It may be changed as he go on and try to make drafts, and maybe something happened that changed his perspective and try to change the story itself. Okay, that's why some of the writers, one story is equivalent to 1 year, depending on the mood and depending on the life experience of the author. It really depends. So next one is about, what aspects do you think the author struggled during the revision? Another, what is the effect of the revision to the published text? Do you think the life experience of the author as changed through time affects the story itself also? So are there characters and situations in the text that could be representative of or similar to the ones in the author's life, like the ones that I have told you? Like, for example, the Korean drama, It's Okay Not to Be Okay. I know you're very familiar with that. Wherein Kim Moon-young is a writer of famous books into that Korean drama. And it is reflected into her literary works, wherein she's so lonely. And then at the same time, the experiences that happened, the morbid experiences have happened in the story is somewhat like related to her life story. So how will knowing about the author amplify your appreciation of the work? Do you love the story at the same time the author himself or the author herself, because both of them has a relationship wherein he tries to use only the story just to make her life beautiful? So that's it for the guided questions when reading literature through a biographical context. Next one is about the notes, the reminders when reading a text through a biographical context. Sometimes the stories are into the life experience of the author, but not all the time. So wag kayong asumera that everything that you see into the literary work is based on true to life or confessional or biographical, because it may happen also that the author is being inspired by other story or being inspired with other context or being inspired with other situation. So a literary text is according to the author's perspective and will be heavily influenced by him or by her. But it is not the only way of studying literature. because we do have other contexts like sociocultural. We do have also the linguistic context. It depends. So these are the examples of literary works written by authors of different backgrounds. So for example, The Under My Invisible Umbrella, written by Laurel Fantauso, wherein it is a literary essay that talks about Filipino-Italian who was born in the United States. I know you have, or you may imagine what a foreigner looks like when he is into the Philippines. And you know for a fact naman na pag may foreigner, pinagtitinginan sila, diba? So, pinagtitinginan kasi something is peculiar to him. So, because he is different from the Filipinos. That's why this encountered experience of Laurel Fantauso is reflected into the story of Under My Invisible Umbrella. Being a Filipino-Italian who was born in the United States, and especially the physical features, na-experience niya yung being like an alien to a certain country. So, but for her, dun sa story is somewhat extra special. But for her, it's more of isolating than welcoming. So, Fantauso's way of writing reflects a lot about her personal encounters within the Philippines. So, to understand her essays better, the reader must know her background about being a Filipino-Italian so that they may know the reasons behind her dilemmas. So, next one is about another literary work by Cristina Pantoja, which is about Catching a Falling Star, which talks about, it is a collection of realistic short stories that revolves around a child character named Tracy or Patricia ng Payatot. In the narratives, you would find out that Tracy is not much involved in outdoor games. She was more inclined to writing, paper doll making, and other simple crafts. So you may already imagine what Cristina Pantoja Hidalgo's childhood memories way back then if you're going to read her story, Catch a Falling Star. So if one tries to research about the author, she may be classified as a female Filipino writer who belongs to the intellectual elite. That's why her writings are influenced by upper middle class situations. So, diba, most of the time, if you are into the upper middle class situation, hindi ka more on streets, more of indoor activities ka lang. So, in the Catch a Falling Star by Cristina Pantoja, it is very reflected into her story. Okay, so let's move on. I think that's the end of the lesson of critical reading approaches based on biographical context. So, let me end my lesson by Ecclesiastes for this quote. There is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heaven. So, whatever happens into our life, we may incorporate with it with a beautiful life story or a beautiful poem. But always remember that everything happens for a reason. So our story may be different from the others, but always remind yourself that your story is a perfect story. So I hope you learned from the story, from the lesson number 4, which is about biographical context. So try to spread your life experiences and make it as an inspiration for others. So always remember by John Berger, Keeping a Rendezvous. A good book is an event in, when we read a story, we should inhabit it. The covers of the book are like a roof and 4 walls. What is happened to the next will take place within the 4 walls of the story. And this is how possible because the story's voice makes everything its own. So try to make your life as a good book. Don't stress yourself, okay? So always be happy and stay safe and make your life experience and life story a blast that no one can get, and at the same time it can be compared to anyone's life story. Have a nice day, everyone, and we'll have another lesson for lesson number 5. Goodbye.